Hello and welcome back. If you're new here, my name's Lexi and I like to talk about luxury beauty. And today we're going to be talking about the new Tom Ford Quartz. So Tom Ford has released a bunch of new palettes recently. We have the Metal-less palette, which just came out. It basically sold out right away, but it will be back. It's limited edition. That's part of the Badass Extreme collection from Tom Ford. It's a new formula as well. It's the same formula that they have in the Quad Lava Luster, which both of these were supposed to be out a couple of months ago. Lava Luster came out, Metal Lust, they had some, product issues with delivery and so forth. So that was delayed, but now we also have 3 new eyeshadow palettes that are due out on Tuesday, February 1st. So I was able to get mine a little early. So I've actually been using them for several weeks now, and I've been able to test out this new formula pretty thoroughly. And I was able to get mine early just because when, the retailers originally received the stock, I guess the release date information wasn't released until after some of them were already sold. So I was lucky I was able to place an order before knowledge of that came across. So they will be available though on February 1st. That is the official release date. So there are 3 new quads. I picked up 2 of the 3. So we have this one here, and you can tell I've kind of used this one for quite a bit so far, considering I've had it for 3 to 4 weeks. So this is number 35, Rose Topaz, and these are called Eye Color Quad Crème. So these are a different formula. They are a creamy powder formula. And then I also picked up 37 Smoky Quartz. So I feel like the Smoky Quartz, depending on what photos you look like, I feel like all of these look very different in the photos, but particularly Smoky Quartz. Sometimes it looks really, you can see more of the like eggplant rosy vibes in it, and other times it looks warmer. So we're going to take a look at some swatches. Let's start with the Rose Topaz. So we've got, I messed up the order I was doing this in. Let me do that. But we have 3, I guess, more normal shades here. And then a sparkle metallic shade as well. So that's the order they are in the actual quad. So we have this is kind of like a beige rose mixed together. It's a warm toned one though. It's like a peachy rose mixed with some beige. This is going to be a creamy matte formula. Again, these are all kind of like a cream to powder type of formula. Then we have this champagne shade with a touch of gold. This is a soft satin formula. And then we have this metallic shade here, which is, again, this one's more of like, more of a taupe with a little bit, it's like a diluted taupe. It's not pigmented enough to be a true taupe, but the undertones in there are definitely more taupey. This is going to be a little bit cooler. And then we have this deep cocoa brown. And again, this one's going to be another creamy matte, like the rosy shade at the top. So 2 mattes, a satin, and a metallic. And I have to say, I really like this particular quad. Let's take a look at the Smoky Quartz as well. I keep calling them the wrong name, so if you hear me call it Rose Quartz, which is what I keep calling it, I mean Rose Topaz, Smoky Quartz. So the Smoky Quartz does not have as many different finishes here. So these are the 4 shades. Gonna leave some space there. And you can see upon swatching, it definitely looks warmer. Let me put the palette up with it. So you can kind of see, when you put these next to each other, you can definitely see the warm tones in here. But when you look at it more isolated, it just looks more like rosy. And this is actually a really deep shade with eggplant in it. Can you see those purple tones in there? So these are actually all a creamy matte formula. So we have kind of a beige shade. You can see it's more golden than the one in the Rose Topaz. This one here is, it looks kind of rosy here. It looks actually like a deeper version of the one in Rose Topaz, right? They look pretty similar in the pan, I feel like, aside from the depth of color. But you can see it definitely has more of that peachy cantaloupe kind of color to it. So this is going to be warmer in tone. This shade here, it's going to be, so that's this one. It's going to be a little bit more terracotta with some rose mixed into it. So it's not straight up terracotta or anything like that, but it's kind of like those terracotta pots with some rose mixed in and just a little bit deeper. And then this shade here, which at first glance just looks like a really deep brown, you can actually see you've got some kind of like eggplant, aubergine type tones in there. So it's not straight up brown. There are it's a little bit of a berryish brown. So let's talk about this new formula. Now, this new formula, there's not a whole lot of information out about it yet. But again, this is a cream formula. And if you look at the back of one of the palettes, you can see that it does say Crème in there. So these are 9 grams. So they are a little bit heavier than the typical, wet dry formula from Tom Ford. They are the same though as the recent mattes, like I believe Desert Fox and so forth, or here's the De La Crème that came out. That's also 9 grams. So it's going to be a similar weight to those. I really think the difference in the weight though is attributed to the moisture content in the products and the particular pigments and so forth used. So I wouldn't put a lot of stock in that. I think they're all kind of the same size. Now, as for the actual formula, it is a creamy powder formula. It's kind of like a gel cream that dries to a powder. It's not supposed to have fallout and it's supposed to be very long lasting. And that's kind of the purpose of this. Now, for me personally, Tom Ford basically has 2 formulas. There's the typical flat pan palettes like this one. This is De La Crème. And these are, typically, it's their typical powder formula. Some of them can be creamy, some of them can be dry. I feel like these palettes in general are pretty inconsistent, but I don't love these. Then there's the wet dry formula, which is going to be beveled, and something like the Tom Ford New Dip is like that. So you can see that the pans are beveled and you have the TF logo in there. So these can be used wet or dry. This is my favorite Tom Ford formula for his classic palettes. This new one has the flat pan appearance, okay? But again, it does say cream on the back, or crème. And this new formula is not a wet dry formula. So it is not intended to be used wet. It is intended to be used dry. It goes on very easily with fingers or with a brush. I have to say it's powdery enough that you can use a fluffy brush with it. But I think something a little bit more firmer pressed is a little bit easier to make sure you're getting the product exactly where it is. Now, as for the fact that there's not supposed to be any fallout, I feel like I don't really see fallout, but sometimes I feel like I can feel some particles falling off when I am applying in a sweeping motion, which is totally normal for eyeshadow. But I don't actually see it on my face. So I'm not sure where it goes. But I just wanted to mention that, I don't think, I wouldn't count on there being 0 fallout on any product. Now, as for longevity, I find that these really do last all day. So I've tested these with and without primer, and I've used a couple different primers. Now, typically I like to use the Viseart Seamless Eye Primer. I find that is the best overall eye primer for me. And I think I like that one because it does seem to be, it has a little bit of slip there. It's a silicone-based primer, so it does allow things to glide on nicely. It increases longevity a little bit, but it's just very comfortable on my eyes, and things seem to work really well with that one for me. I've also tried it with the Tom Ford eye primer, the one that came out last year. And I have to say, this formula does not work well with that primer. It goes on just fine, but I do end up with creasing. I want to say it was around the 6-hour mark. So I can't even get a full day's wear in without any creasing or, it not looking as great with the Tom Ford eye primer. So just something to note. it actually holds up better without any primer than it does with the Tom Ford primer. Now, the Tom Ford primer is a moisturizing primer, and that's really great when your eyes are feeling dry and so forth. It does work well with other products, but not with this formula. So I can use that with some of the other Tom Ford eyeshadow quads. It's not a favorite primer though, so just something to note. Now, as for these, the creamy mattes between both palettes are consistent. They go on better with a patting motion versus a sweeping motion. They do go on nicely with a fluffy brush if you want to deposit pigment and so forth. But if you're looking for a really opaque layer, tapping is going to be best because, again, it's a creamy product. So when you have something with moisture that touches the skin first, those water molecules essentially are going to attach to that, and they're going to create like drag. So you could end up with skipping. That's totally normal. You just need to apply with a patting motion and that'll be fine. Now, the satin shade, this is a very, very light satin shade. There's not a lot of pigment to it, but yet it's not a topper. It goes on very smoothly. It's comfortable in the eyes. It's a little bit frosty in appearance. The metallic shade though, I think is what really makes this Rose Topaz palette, because it takes it from just like kind of a normal boring palette like to something a little bit better. This is what I have on my eyes right now. This is the one I've been gravitating towards between these two palettes. And I have to say, every time I wear this, you know, it's just like a great everyday neutral kind of palette, but I always get compliments on it. And I'm always really impressed with how it looks at the end of the day. Even after 12 hours, it looks freshly applied. And I feel like this, you know how sometimes like foundations or certain makeup products, they look better after sitting on your face for an hour or so? That's how these eyeshadows perform, both palettes. You know, after you put them on, after, you know, your natural skin chemistry kind of reacts with it, I feel like they look a little bit better and they meld with your skin a little bit more. So I think they look better after maybe like 30 minutes or so of being on your skin versus when you first put them on. So let's go ahead and take a look at some demos. We'll come back, talk a little bit more about the shadows and do some comparisons. All right, so we're gonna start off with Rose Topaz. And I'm gonna start off with my fingers. I do have the Vizier eye primer on. We're gonna start with this first shade here, this kind of like rosy taupe. And let's see how this goes on here. We'll just put this on the outer edge. I mean, it actually feels just really silky. Let me use a brush on the other side and see how they compare. Going with my go-to Sonia G Soft Shader. And look at that, how that comes up. You can see it kind of looks creamy on the brush even. Not super creamy, but creamier than a powder. So let's just see how that goes on. It's definitely more product on the side with the finger. You can see it shears out more in the middle, but you know, I think they're pretty similar. Taking the Esom V33, I'm gonna go into this more like golden champagne shade that's next to it. And you can see just going in here how creamy it looks in the palette. And I'm gonna put this in the crease here and work this up a little bit to the brow. I'm gonna get a little dab of the brown, the deep brown with this, and I tapped it on my cloth and I'm just lightly putting that on here. Wiped off the brush, going back into this more champagne shade and going over the deep brown that I kind of got in the crease there a little bit to subdue it just a touch. Going back into this like rosier shade first, gently tapping over the edges of the deep brown. And I'm leaving the inner portion completely plain here. Next, I want to go into this shade. This is the shade I'm really excited to see. You know, I love these more sparkly shades here. I'm going to start this on the inner corner and just kind of lightly go over this here. All right, so I got a little bit on the brush there, but let me just see with fingers what it does. I actually think this shade goes on better with the brush. All right, so I'm just Gonna tap some over the whole lid here. Just for a light layer of sparkle, but you can see there's definitely more sparkle here where there was no shadow underneath it. Just gonna put a little bit more on. All right, so this is the first look. And then I think under the eyes, I'm just gonna use a little bit of this one and add a little bit more of the sparkle in the inner corner. So I'm taking the Synergy Pencil one into the sparkle shade first and just dabbing that in the inner corner. I can feel little sparkles falling down using this particular brush. So you can see I got some fallout there. So just something to note there. Let's see. I feel like the this rosier shade's a little bit creamier than the sparkle, which, you know, makes sense, but and I'm just gonna go ahead and use the same brush in the deep brown and put this very softly along the upper lash line as well. So I thought these products might be creamy enough that I didn't feel any fallout with the Pencil One brush, but I actually do, even with the dark brown. So just something to know, it's not creamy enough that the product is really, you know, sticking to itself more so than a traditional powder product. So there's the final look. I'll show you from a distance after I finish my makeup. So this is the final look from a distance. To say I like it more than I thought I would. Swatching it, it looks really warm, but on the eyes, it really looks more classically neutral. And I love the shimmer topper. The formula seems nice so far. I'll have to play with it more and see how it goes. Now on my skin, I have the Cocoa Moisture Foundation in 012. I have on the Chanel Red Camellia blush in shade number 1, the red one, and the Opal blush stick from Dior from the spring. So I have that on my face, and then on the lips, it is the Chanel Rouge Coco Balm in 924 Fall For Me. And that's it. All right, going in with Rose Topaz, starting off with the Synergy Pencil Pro in the deep brown. I have the Viseart Eye Primer on, and I'm going to take this and smudge this along the upper lash line here. And I started in the middle, so my deepest point is there. Just going to bring this a little bit, angle it into the crease, just a touch. And just kind of work that in. Next, I'm taking the Esom W21. I'm going to go into this more champagne gold shade, and I'm just going to put this right above the brown, overlapping a little bit. So just kind of blurring out those edges. Just gonna get a little bit more right here in the center. And I just wanted to show you kind of what the finish looks like up close. You can kind of see a little bit of what the texture's like just from the finish. You can see it's a little creamy, a little powdery. It's got this like shimmer, and where you kind of go over it more, it ends up looking creamier. I'll take the Esom S33 with nothing on it and just softening the crease a little bit. I'm going to take the Pencil Pro, and I wiped off most of the dark brown. I'm going to go into the rose, I guess, and just add a little bit of this on the lower lash line here. This is really more of a nude type rose, so it's not that pink. So I am actually happy with this look just as it is, but honestly, I still just really like using this shimmer shade. So I'm going to take the W21 go into this and just put some of this kind of all over the lid. And I'm going to start in the inner corner and just kind of pat over. Just for a little sparkle. And let's just add a little bit more here. There, so that's the difference with the sparkle versus without. You can see that this sparkly shade, it's not completely translucent base. You know, you do get a little coverage. So this is my final look. Finish my makeup, I'll see you in a second. And this is the final look from a distance. I added the new Dior blush from the spring collection in 352. I have on the Coconut Aqua Foundation 012 and a light dusting of the Sisley Fido Poudre Lumiere or Fido Poudre Compact in shade number 1 Rosy. On the lips is the Dior lip balm from the New Look collection in 728 New Rose, which I'm really loving. And I have on the Makeup by Mario highlighter in Opal. And that's everything. We're just going to do a quick look with the Rose Topaz quad, and I'm starting with the Refer 27, the Viseart eye primer on. I'm just going to get a little bit of this and dab this in the outer corner here, just to darken that. And then I'm dragging this a little bit in the crease. I'm going to be going over this though in the crease. Okay, next I'm moving into the champagne shade here and just getting some of that on the brush, and I'm going to go into the crease here, but I'm focusing more slightly above it and softening that deeper brown shade. You can see it adds a little bit of a glisten as well. Next, I'm going into the rosy shade here. Just gonna get some on here, and I'm just dusting this on the lid here, on the mobile lid. Just going all over. All right, and next I'm using my finger into the sparkly shade here, and I'm just gonna put this all over the lid. All right, and I'm taking the Byredo 03 brush into the sparkly shade here, and I'm just gonna add a dab of this right on the inner corner. And for the lower lash line, I'm just going to use this rosier shade here. All right, so this is going to be the eye look. I'm just going to finish it off with some eyeliner and mascara, and I'll see you in a minute. All right, and this is the final look. And here's the final look from a distance. So I have on the Chanel Sublimage Les Sensitant foundation and a bit of the La Comète blush from Chanel in Pêche Cosmique underneath, topped with the Tom Ford Brazen Rose blush and the Chantecaille Holiday highlighter right up top in the Pearl Lumiere shade. And the only shade. I have Tom Ford Sugar Glider on my lips. And that's it. Using the Smoky Quartz palette from Tom Ford, the Sonia G Worker brush, and I'm going to start off with this first shade here, and let's just see how this goes. Just kind of putting this all over. It's a nice base color. And we're going to keep things simple today. Just going to add a touch of the one right below it, just to the outer portion here, just for a little depth, and just feathering that in. Just taking the Omnia Gold crease brush with nothing on it, just softening that a little bit. And I'm taking the Refer 23 brush into the dark brown shade, and I'm going to use this to line the upper lash line. wipe that off. I'm gonna go into the first shade, add a little bit of this to the inner corner portion here and on the lower lash line. Just kind of diffusing this deepest part of the line here as well. So this is the first eye look with this palette, and I will show you the finished look in a minute. And this is the final eye look from a distance. Haven't done the rest of my makeup yet, but I have on the Sisley Le Temps foundation with a light coating of the Sisley Fido Pudra Pressed Compact in shade number 1 Rosy. And that's it. All right, we are going to go into the Smoky Quartz quad, and I'm going to start off with this deep brown shade that actually has a hint of purple in it, and I'm using the Byredo 01 brush. We're just going to dab a little bit of this on the outer corner here. So it really looks like a cocoa brown, but there is like a hint of aubergine in here. And see, because my lids, I always end up getting a little mess there. I'm just going to take this brush, I wiped it off, and I'm dragging this color into the crease here. And I have the Tom Ford eye primer on today. Moving on, we're gonna go into this shade right next to it. It's kind of like this rosy-ish shade. And we're gonna put this adjacent here. Just going over the edges of the deeper shade. And then last up, we're gonna go into this like camel shade here. And this like rosier shade that I put on, actually, it's like a rusty rose. It's kind of interesting. So just gonna put that here in the inner portion. So this is it. I'm just gonna take this brush, I wiped it off. Just feel like this eye didn't blend quite as smoothly as the other eye. So let's just give that a little more effort. All right, so there's that. And I'm just gonna take a clean crease brush and kind of go into that area. I'm taking the S33 from Esom and just going in, cleaning that up a little bit. Now I am doing a concealer test right now, or I would put something on the lower lash line. I would probably just go ahead with this shade here. However, I don't want to put anything there today. So for eyeliner today, I'm going to take one of the Byredo, these are the eye kajuls. And I'm just going to take the black one here, or, oh, this one's blue. Hold on. Here's the black one. So I'm just going to line my eyes with this on the upper lash line, and I'm leaving the lower lash line plain today. All right, so I'm just going to take the 01 and just kind of smudge that liner a little bit, just so it's not that harsh. All right, I'm going to finish my makeup. I'll show you the final look in a second. And this is the final look from a distance. I have on the Chanel No. 1 foundation in shade BD01, the Clé de Peau concealer in Ivory, the Chanel Brun Russie blush, and topped for highlighter, I have the Baume Essentiel in Ensoleil from Chanel. On my brows, Givenchy brow pencil and the Mr. Brow Groom gel. And on my lips, we have Tom Ford Neutral Purdy lipstick topped with the In the Buff gloss. And that's it. All right, so I hope those demos were helpful so you can see how the actual products perform and the consistency and so forth. I have to say I do really enjoy this formula. Now, out of Tom Ford's normal, permanent palettes, we now have this cream formula, we have the normal powder formula, and then we have the wet dry. If I were to rank them, my preference would still be the wet dry, followed by this cream, and then last on the list would be the powder formula. So I do really like these, but I feel like having some sort of metallic shade in there is, I really like having the metallics in there. So that's the wrong palette there, but I think the metallic really kind of helps because it's nice to have some sort of topper to go over these products, because yes, you can blend them together, but they do take a little bit more work to blend than some more powdery shadows. So I feel like having the topper on there really just makes it a little bit more flawless looking when you're done, if you're able to put that on there. So that's one of the reasons I prefer Rose Topaz over Smoky Quartz. I also prefer it because this color story is just not my thing, but the actual formulas of it are very nice. So I like the formula. This color story though is overly warm for what I was hoping it would be. Now let's take a look at some comparisons. We're gonna start off with the powder formula here. This is 28 de la Crème. I'm just going to swatch this whole thing. Now, again, these are very nice to go on in swatches. They can be a little patchy, and I do find that the powder formula for these, for the Tom Ford quads can be inconsistent. I have several of them, and some of them are drier than others. So I think they're not great personally, but this is the closest color story I have in any Tom Ford palette to the Smoky Quartz. And actually it's my closest color story match to any of my palettes I own from across the brands. Moving on, this is Tom Ford's new dip. It's a wet dry formula, and it's very silky going on. It does have a bit of a frosty appearance. This is not going to match this rose topaz, but I wanted to share it just because I know a lot of people have this one. So you can see that this taupe shade is kind of reminiscent here, but again, this is going to be a little bit frostier versus this one has a little bit more sparkle in it. There is actual like glitter pieces in there that you can kind of see. So it's not quite as finely milled as the one in New Dip. But you can see all of these colors overall are going to be a little bit cooler and a little bit lighter than what you get in the Rose Topaz. But the Rose Topaz is really more kind of like an updated New Dip in my opinion. Moving on to another powder palette, we have Desert Fox. And this one, we're going to compare this with the Smoky Quartz. And we're going to put this right here so we can kind of... All right, so you can kind of see how these more like orangey terracotta shades kind of match up. This is actually pretty similar. It's kind of like a cross between these two shades. Next up, you can see this is a new palette for me. I haven't really used this one yet. This is Body Heat though. So it is a classic. I wanted to kind of put this one, we'll put this here. So you can kind of see that this reddish shade in Body Heat, it's going to be, this is more red versus more brown in the Smoky Quartz. And this is going to be a little bit more orange than in Body Heat. And this like really deep espresso eggplant color doesn't quite match with that, but you can see that the color story is going to have some similarities. Now, a couple Chanel quads I wanted to compare. This one here is Clair Obscur, which is number 308. And we're going to put that one up here. So you can see that they're both very classic neutral palettes. Clair Obscur has a little bit more warmth to it in some of the shades. You can see that if you compare the browns side by side, they're going to be pretty similar, but the Tom Ford is slightly cooler. This lighter shade here in Clair Obscur is going to be warmer than what we have in the Tom Ford, and these two are also just ever so slightly warmer than the Rose Topaz. And then we also have Tisse Essentielle, and this is another like classic neutral palette from Chanel. And we're going to put that right next to Clair Obscur. So these two shades are very, very light. But here's the browns. You can see that overall it's much more muted. It's going to be a little bit cooler than Clair Obscur. And tones, it's kind of similar in tone to the Rose Topaz. Rose Topaz actually, you know, I think this rosy shade here is going to be a little bit warmer than what we have in the Tisse Essentielle. But overall, that palette is more muted in general than the Tom Ford. Now, I also wanted to take a look at this Burberry eyeshadow palette. This is the iconic I Am Face palette. We're just gonna look at the eyeshadows. They don't really match either of these, but I wanted to show you the difference in the vibrancy levels here. We're gonna put this down here, just because it kind of reminds me of a more vibrant version of the Smoky Quartz. You can see that this is just like brighter, but we have similar color story essentially with this bright like orangey shade. We've got the orangey tones in here, got the golden yellow and so forth. So I feel like it's just a brighter version essentially. All right, and this is Dior's Soft Cashmere. This is gonna be cooler than the Rose Topaz, but I thought I would just share it with you because again, it's one of those like classic palettes that a lot of people have. And let me just get the last one here. Did I do that one? Okay. So those are the 5 shades in Soft Cashmere compared to the Rose Topaz. So that is it for my comparisons. So just looking at these again, if you're looking at Rose Topaz, we have these 4 shades here. We have a matte rosy beige with a slightly golden champagne satin. Then we have this metallic, which is a soft taupey shade. And then we have a deep cocoa brown, and that's gonna be a creamy matte. And then we have Smoky Quartz here. So you kind of have this like golden beige shade up top, followed by more of, these are both kind of a terracotta shade. This one's gonna be more orange and lighter. This one's gonna have a little bit more red in it, but it also has some orange and like that reddish brown. And then this deep brown actually is more of an eggplant. So there's definitely some purple tones in there mixed with the brown. So these are the 2 palettes I picked up. As for my final thoughts, I like this new formula. I think this is a great new formula. I would love to replace the powder palettes, you know, the non-wet dry ones with this formula. I think it's a very nice formula. Is it my favorite eyeshadow formula? It is not, but I think it's really nice. I think it's better than the powder formula that they are currently using. I like the creaminess. I like the way that they turn out on the eyes and how long they last. And I really like the Rose Topaz palette. I do think that they need to have some sort of like metallic shade in each palette, just as kind of like a finishing touch if you are somebody like me who, you know, maybe is not the best at applying eyeshadow. And, you know, I think it just, it hides any imperfections that you may have. So I personally love the Rose Topaz color story. I think it's a great everyday palette. When I first swatched it, I have to say, I was originally disappointed with the palettes just upon swatching, only because the color stories look so much warmer than they did online. And I have to say, once I put Rose Topaz on, I totally changed my mind. Every time I wear it, I keep looking at my eyes throughout the day. I find it to be one of those palettes that is so easy to wear every day. You know, it's neutral looking. You can wear it anywhere, yet it just does something that makes your eyes look great. So it, to me, I think of it as an updated nude dip. Nude dip's a little frosty, and this one is not, you know, it's got a nice subtle elegance to it. So I think it's a really great everyday palette. The Smoky Quartz, I think, is a nice palette. I like the formulas. The color story, though, is not great for me. So I'll use this more so mixed with some other shades. I do want to have like a topper or something probably with this one. It's a nice look for like a smoky eye and so forth. But it's just not my favorite between the 2 of these. Now, as for the Tom Ford Metal Lust palette, which I already have a video out on this, this is another different formula. This one's limited edition, however. Just swatched this one time, but these are creamy as well. They're not a cream formula though. If I had to pick, you know, which formula I preferred, I do prefer the Metal Lust formula, but again, that one's not going to be permanent. We're just going to go up like this. This one is more, I mean, the creamy mattes feel kind of similar to those in these new palettes. The metallics though are reminiscent more of the texture of like the wet dry formula. But overall, these are going to be like a high moisture, creamy type product as well. They're just not, they're just slightly different than this. So I really like both of them. But if I had to pick between these three palettes, the Metal Lust is my favorite, followed by the Rose Topaz. And I have to say, I love both of those. So I think they're both great, like everyday palettes. You can see Metal Lust is going to be a bit more pigmented, and Rose Topaz is a little bit more understated. So I think they're both great options. I really like both of them. So I hope this was helpful. If you have any additional questions or comparison requests, please let me know. I will be doing an update video very soon with comparison requests for a bunch of products. So this is kind of like last call. Let me know for anything else that you would like to see compared, and I will have that in the next update video. So thank you so much for tuning in. I hope this was helpful, and have a great day. And again, these are supposed to launch Tuesday, February 1st. So enjoy, and I will see you very soon.